Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Andy's Witchcraft. I hope you're all enjoying spooky season. I know I am. And speaking of spooky season, this episode is going to talk about the spookiest Wheel of the Year holiday there is, Samhain. So, if you want to know about how to celebrate and the history behind it, stick around, why don't you? If you hear that my voice sounds a little different, I have been battling a sore throat, but I have made a commitment and I'm sticking to it to fight through it and hopefully it doesn't sound awful to your ears. So, let's get started, shall we? What is Samhain, you may ask, if you're a new witch? If you have been a witch for a while, you probably know what it is, but for those of you who don't know, Samhain is a holiday celebrated from October 31st to November 2nd. In Gaelic, it translates to summer's end. So it basically means that summer is officially over. I know, Mabon, the autumnal equinox, should tell us that. But if you haven't noticed, I know in my area, it was really freaking hot until about mid October. So this is like official summer should end. If not, we have a climate crisis on our hands. It marks the midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. So it marks the beginning of the dark part of the year, and it prepares people for less abundant seasons ahead. The festival of Samhain marked the end of the Celtic year and the beginning of the new one. So it is essentially equivalent to the witch's new year. Every year in late October, families would bring in the last of their harvest and attend the Samhain festival. In Celtic culture, people would leave offerings outside of villages and fields for the fairies and the fae in the area. And the big reason behind this is that Samhain is when the veil between this world and the other world is at its thinnest. So it allows spirits to pass through, which includes fae spirits. Ancestors were and still are honored and invited into our homes, and at the same time, protection magic is integral during this part to ward off harmful spirits. Historically, people wore costumes and masks to disguise themselves as harmful spirits to avoid harm. Sound familiar? Well, that's the origin story of Halloween. Some Celts dressed as monsters to deter fairies from kidnapping them, and some still do to this day. Food was prepared for both the living and the dead, and if an ancestor could not eat the food for any reason, so for example, in the Buddhist tradition, if they were reincarnated as a hungry ghost, then this food was ritually shared with the less well off, so giving to the poor, donating to food banks, coats for kids if your area has one. The Celts believed that spirits needed to be appeased so that families and their livestock would survive the long winter. So that's a little bit about the history and background of Samhain. Let's go into the more witchy mythology surrounding it. Now, I could not really find any mythologies specific to Samhain, but there were some associated with why we believe this is the thinnest, the time where the veil is the thinnest between the living and the dead. But other than that, a lot of the mythologies I found were mostly about autumn and the season, which I discussed in the Mabon episode. So I have two big mythologies popular that are specific to Samhain. The first is Dawn. Dawn is a Celtic god associated with the realm of the dead. He reigns over Tech Duin, a sacred location in the Celtic belief system, and it is there where he serves as a guardian of the dead. He embodies the concept of mortality and the journey to the other world. As a deity of death, Dawn symbolizes the transition from life to the realm of the departed. His festival is celebrated specifically at Samhain, and the legend of Dawn tells the story of the first Milesians. One of them, Dawn, came with his brothers Amergin, the wise poet, Hierimon, Aranon, Colpa, and Heber to conquer Ireland. When they landed, they were met by three Cid queens, Banba, Fodla, and Eru. Eru took one look at the invaders and prophesied great fortune for them. In exchange, she asked that they name the nation after her. Dawn laughed and said they owe her nothing and would succeed by the strength of their arms and the power of their gods alone. Angered by this, Eru told Dawn that he'd have no conquests and no sons to carry on his line. When the Milesians later met with the Dedanan kings at Tara, they were told that the Dedanan forces weren't yet ready to do battle. So Amergin courteously agreed to pull the ships back 9 waves' breadth from the shore. And if their landing could be prevented, they'd go home and never return. When they withdrew, the druids of the Dedanan raised up mighty storms and scattered their fleets, wrecking many ships and drowning their warriors, including Dawn himself. And so the words of Eru came to pass. Today, the place of his drowning is known as the House of Dawn, and it is where the dead wait for their ferry. So, that's a little bit about one deity associated with Samhain. The next mythology is not associated with a deity, but it's a tradition popular around Samhain and Halloween, whichever you celebrate, and it is the myth of Stingy Jack. This myth is shared across Ireland and Scotland, and when I read this, I knew I just had to share it. Stingy Jack worked as a blacksmith and had a reputation for being a drunk and a miser who was forever playing mean tricks on his family and friends. One day, he happened upon the devil himself in his local hostelry. Remarkably unfazed, Jack brazenly invited the devil to join him at his table and have a drink with them. However, being as stingy as he was, Jack was of course entirely unwilling to pay for the drinks, so he suggested that the devil should transform himself into a coin that can be used to settle the bill. In exchange for this, Jack offered the devil his soul. However, once the devil agreed and transformed into the required coin, Jack cunningly put it into his pocket along with a silver cross, which stopped the devil from transforming back into his true form. Jack did everything to deign to free the devil, but only did so once the devil agreed to leave him in peace for the next 10 years and not try to claim his soul until that time elapsed. Over the years that followed, Jack continued to be as miserly and unpleasant as before. 10 years later, Jack was confronted by the devil as he made his way down a dark country lane. The devil wanted Jack's soul, but Jack, thinking on his feet, tricked the devil yet again. He begged the devil to get him an apple from a nearby tree so that he might have a final taste of life in the human world. As the devil climbed high into the boughs of the tree, Jack quickly carved a cross on the trunk, stopping the devil from descending. Jubilantly, Jack demanded that the devil renounce his claim on his soul. The devil, cornered, agreed. Upon his death, he wasn't let into either heaven or hell due to his questionable behavior. The devil sent him off with nothing but a piece of coal to light his way. Jack made a lantern of sorts with the burning coal by placing it in a carved-out turnip, and roamed the earth ever since with his lantern. This is how the tradition of carving scary faces onto turnips and potatoes into jack-o'-lanterns began, and it was thought that this would scare away Stingy Jack. Over time, the custom shifted to carving pumpkins. So, that is the history of the jack-o'-lantern. And yeah, I thought it was very interesting, very humorous. It's a cool bedtime story to tell your kids, maybe when they're a bit older and can acknowledge the concept of death. But yeah, all right. So the next section, I'm going to discuss the Christian counterpart of Samhain. So, in the ninth century, Christianity incorporated the tradition of honoring the dead into the Christian calendar, with All Saints' Day on November 1st, followed by All Souls' Day on November 2nd. All Saints' Day is a day commemorating all the saints of the church, both known and unknown, who have attained heaven. This holiday is also known as All Hallows' Day, the Feast of All Saints, the Solemnity of All Saints, and Hallowmas. This day comes from the belief that there is a spiritual connection between those in heaven and on earth. Sound familiar? It's similar to the principle of the veil thinning between the living and the dead. So, this day, we believe that there is a stronger connection between the living and the departed saints. All Souls' Day is a day commemorating all the faithful departed, those baptized Christians who are believed to be in purgatory because they died with the guilt of lesser sins on their souls. And so the Roman Catholic doctrine holds that the prayer of the faithful on earth will help cleanse these souls in order to fit them for the vision of God in heaven. And the day is dedicated to prayer and remembrance. Sometimes people will decorate the graves of their loved ones, and priests celebrate Mass wearing gowns of varying colors: black for mourning, violet for penance, or white for the hope of the resurrection. So, those are the Christian counterparts of Samhain. Whether they were placed scheduled to be November 1st and 2nd because Halloween is October 31st and they want to draw attention away from Halloween and towards saints, I don't know. But the point is, even Christians acknowledge the importance of commemorating ancestors and saints, departed ones, and venerating them and hoping that they reach a better part of the afterlife. So now I'm going to talk about biblical associations with Samhain. Because Halloween or Samhain is seen as the devil's holiday by evangelicals, there are no specific Bible verses directly related to this holiday, but there are verses about the connection between the living and the dead, which is what this holiday is truly about. Although evangelicals consider communicating with the dead or recognizing the dead to be a sin, we as witches and pagans know that that is not a case. So let's get down to it. There have been tons of moments when spirits were capable of communicating with people on earth. So I'm going to list a few and discuss them. In Luke chapter 9, verses 30 to 31, it says, 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. So, even Moses and Elijah, who had passed away and went to heaven, they came down to earth and talked with Jesus. Even Jesus spoke with the dead. How is that a sin? I don't know. In 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 1 through 25, I'm not going to read it all, but you can look it up. But the gist is that King Saul was terrified by the size of the Philistine army he'd have to face soon. He tried to consult with God for help. When God doesn't appear to answer, he takes matters into his own hands, meets with a medium to try and communicate with his recently passed friend Samuel. The witch brought up Samuel, who was not super pleased that he had been brought back. So, some Christians interpret these verses as, see, necromancy is a sin. I believe that the only reason Samuel wasn't pleased is because King Saul just abandoned his faith completely and he tried to turn to other manners. He abandoned God completely. He didn't have faith in God. He didn't have any hope in God. He was afraid, and so he disregarded his faith for other things. That is why I believe that Samuel wasn't pleased. Necromancy itself is not a sin, but it's when you abandon your faith and you abandon your morals to commune with the dead or make a deal with the devil or whatever it may be. Not that that happens often, but it does happen, right? Sometimes. And that is what this is a sin. Communicating with the dead in of itself is not a sin. But the point is, Samuel was brought up. I truly believe it was the real Samuel. Some people say it was a demon disguised as Samuel, but I don't know. Samuel seemed upset, and I don't see why a demon would be upset that King Saul was talking with them. But regardless, the point is, it is possible to commune with the dead at certain times when there is a strong connection. Finally, in Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17, 1 Kings 17, chapter 17, verse 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 17 through 24, and John chapter 11, verses 1 through 44. These are all verses where Jesus raised the dead. And so even though evangelicals claim that the Bible supports the belief that there is no connection between the living and the dead, and once you're dead, you're in God's hands and that's it, many verses clearly contradict this belief. How could Jesus raise the dead without having a connection with the afterlife? How can demons possess people in the living world but then be driven back to quote unquote hell without a connection to the afterlife? There needs to be that connection to do these things. So clearly, the veil between the living and the dead is not as closed as they believe. So those are all the verses I have. You can look through the Bible and see what else you can find. But the matter of the fact is, time and time again, in the Old and the New Testament, there has been evidence that you can communicate with the dead. And yeah, that's about it. Now let's get on to the Samhain associations. These are items you can include on a Samhain altar if you choose to make one. A lot of these are similar to Mabon symbols, but regardless, let's get started. The element, so Samhain is closely associated with all four elements. However, the energy and spirit of Samhain is very, very closely tied to water. And that's because water is strongly correlated with the afterlife. If you remember the story of Don, the ferry to the afterlife. He drowned in the water, and now that location is where people await to go to the afterlife, in the water. So that is why it's closely related with Samhain. Colors, think of Halloween-like colors. So black, orange, green, dark purple, dark yellow, and brown. Foods associated with this time are soups, pumpkins, apples, acorns, pomegranates, nutmeg, acorn. Oh, I put acorns twice. And rowan berries. Crystals associated with Samhain are amethyst, black obsidian, orange calcite, tiger's eye, smoky quartz, and dragonstone. Given that so much of this holiday surrounds protection, a lot of these crystals are for protection, and so these are good crystals to work with. The holiday is related to honoring the gods, death, fae, and witchcraft, and so these are the common crystals to connect with your spirituality, connect with your witchiness, what you may have. Symbols. Symbols for Samhain are candles, bones, brooms, mirrors, bonfires, jack-o'-lanterns, the scythe, the atame, scarecrows, baskets, and the cornucopia. Animals associated with Samhain are bats, cats, wolves, owls, and bears. Excuse my phone, I forgot to put that on mute. These are animals associated with death, spirit, intuition, or wisdom. And obviously, that is what Samhain is about. So, Plants and herbs associated with Samhain are dying leaves, chrysanthemums, marigolds, cinnamon, star anise, rosemary, mugwort, and tobacco leaves. Deities and spiritual beings strongly related to Samhain and who you may have a stronger connection with during this time are Lucifer, Lilith, Dionysus, Hecate, Hestia, Hermes, Hades, Demeter, Persephone, Dagon. And Dagon, by the way, is a god who rests until fertility is restored in the spring. Caradwin, who is capable of crossing worlds and reminds us to remember and honor our dear departed. And Dawn. Spell work associated with Samhain are protection magic, spell work with the Fae, cleansing, ancestral magic, glamour spells, and divination spells. Now, as a Christo Pagan Buddhist, if you have been around on my podcast before, you know the drill. Let's talk about some Buddhist traditions during Samhain. So, Samhain has a lot to do with darkness, death, fears, and the closest thing to Samhain that Buddhists celebrate would be the Hungry Ghost Festival or Ghost Month. And I already did a podcast episode on this, so I'm not going to really repeat the information here. But if you want to know more about it, check out my podcast episode on it. I will link it below and you can know more. But although many Buddhists do not celebrate Samhain or Halloween, there are things you can do as a Buddhist during this time to celebrate. Introspection and meditation is always a good start. Again, like I've said before, meditation is not just sitting silently, legs crossed, and eyes closed, and that's it. You can meditate by listening to music. You can meditate by doing art. As long as you are contemplating on yourself and your body and not what is outside of you, that is meditation. That is introspection. Acknowledging the shadows within us, what scares us, why they scare us, and so on, is also a great way, aka shadow work. And doing this can help us grow to be more mindful. So however you do shadow work, that is a very Buddhist way to celebrate. Because it's all about acknowledging what you did, quote unquote, wrong in the past and not holding on to it. Letting it go and learning from it and trying not to do it again. That's what life is about, and that's what being a Buddhist is about. As Buddhists, we take that scary stuff. Instead of avoiding it and running away, we transform it into something good. Something that not only benefits us, but humanity. So leave out an offering of the spirits around you, especially the hungry ghosts, and help others end their suffering. Finally, let's get down to how can you celebrate Samhain? The first thing I have listed is to create an ancestor altar. Some items you can include on this are a cloth or veil to lay over your altar area, candles to light the way and focus your energy, place items that have been given to you by ancestors, photos of your ancestors or ancestral land are great to put, and food. Food is very important in my culture, Middle Eastern, Lebanese, Arab. We all eat. And other cultures, food is very important as well. So place some food on your altar. But if you know your ancestors' favorite food, like your passed on loved one, place some of their favorite food on there. The second thing you can do is host a dumb supper. A dumb supper is when ancestors are invited to join in a large feast. So you open the windows in your homes to let them in, place an extra plate of the food on an empty chair, and sit silently, reminisce, and rekindle with deceased loved ones. If you don't want to sit through an entire supper in silence, like me, I have anxiety. Extreme, prolonged moments of silence stress me out. So instead, you can leave a cake out at night as an offering. Just don't put it outside because you don't want wild animals eating it. It can be harmful for their health, but leave the cake out on a table or something. And if you're comfortable leaving the window open, leave it open a bit. It helps it easier for them to get in. um, and if you have any pets, please make sure it's somewhere they can't get to it. The ancestors don't care where you put the cake as long as they get cake. The next thing you could do is visit a cemetery. And don't forget to do some protection before and some cleansing afterwards, because that's truly important. You don't want, especially a lot of spirits stick around in the cemeteries if they don't have any loved ones around. And so you don't want to bring home one of those. So please be careful, look into protection, and yeah, stay safe. You could also do a meditation to honor your ancestors. Like I said, find ways that you connect most with your ancestors, and that is meditating. It does not have to be silence, it does not have to be eyes closed in the dark, whatever. Do a tarot reading on yourself. So pull cards to see what awaits for you in the coming months. Like I said, Samhain is Witch's New Year. So you could kind of do a reading on your year ahead or maybe your year behind, how your year was, what did you learn from it, stuff like that. And you can also do New Year's resolutions because even though it's not New Year's, it's the Witch's New Year. So do some resolutions for the next year of your life. You can also decorate. So some decoration ideas are pumpkins, skulls, and ghostly things. Any decorations that are the colors of Samhain that I already talked about. You could also bake Samhain bread and put your intention into it, carve a sigil into it, whatever you want to do. And just, yeah, have that be for a specific purpose. You can burn something that you want to let go of. I'll be burning old letters from previous relationships that I found the other day. I had completely forgot that I put them in an old shoebox, and now that I found them, I want to and can burn them and move on because it's exhausting holding on to these things. And I don't, it's weird to just throw them in the garbage to me. I would rather burn them and watch it, and that's my meditation, watching the flames burn away old letters that I have no use for anymore. And historically, a large community bonfire was integral for celebrating each new season. So why not continue this tradition? Invite your friends and your family. Maybe they can burn stuff that they want to let go of too. And yeah, just have a celebration of community because that's important. We can't be isolated. One thing I learned throughout my entire education as a psychology student is that humans are social animals. We can't live lives alone completely, no matter how much we try. So, yeah, build a community. You could also have a ritual bath with the intention of releasing what no longer serves you. If you don't want to burn, if you have asthma and you can't handle smoke, a ritual bath will help as well. You could dress up in a witchy costume and go out trick or treating because why not? I believe you're never too old to do that. As long as you're in the costume, I will give candy. I'm not going to turn anyone away. But if you really feel awkward going trick or treating, hand out candy. Again, it's great to give, it's great to help others. Hand out some candy. You could also dance to some spooky music. My favorite spooky song to dance to is Spooky Scary Skeletons. It's just so catchy. And I think with the name like Spooky Scary Skeletons, like the three S's, it's catchy. It's fun to say, like a tongue twister. And yeah, so make a Samhain playlist and dance to some spooky music. Finally, you can do some journaling. Write down the changes you want to see moving forward. What things are you ready to let go of? And what goals are you ready to tackle? Um, and these are just examples of journal prompts. If you have some in mind, do that. Journaling is just great. It's, I like to journal more than I like to meditate because like journaling is meditation, but I like it more than like traditional meditation, I guess. So give it a try. Highly recommend it. So that is the end of this episode. If you liked it, you could follow me. If you're listening on podcast, follow the on podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, follow the podcast to get updates on the newest episodes. If you're listening on YouTube, you can subscribe to my channel to get updates, and like and comment on this video. If you want to join a witchy community full of acceptance and who talks about all things witchcraft and gives each other advice and resources, I have a Discord server, the Crystal Caverns. Right now, we are running a profile picture making contest, and there are amazing prizes to be won. And the contest will be running until November 30th. So you're going to have to join the server to register for it. And yeah, we'd love to have you. So the link will be below. If you want to book a reading with me, right now I am running a fundraiser where 50% of the proceeds made from my readings are going to be donated to the Windsor, Ontario's Trans Wellness Center. Because of everything going on in Canada, I want to show my support. So please, if you want to buy a reading up of someone, I'd love it if you guys could support this fundraising opportunity. Um, so the link will be below to book with me. And you could follow me on social media and message me if you have any questions. So follow me on social media if you want. My Instagram is at Andy's Witchcraft, and my TikTok and Tumblr are both at Sacred Moon Divination. So yeah, that is about it. Thanks for listening to the episode, guys. Blessed be. Have a wonderful day, week, month, and year.